Hi, I'm Lee Burton with FMS. Over the past few years, we've gotten a lot of questions concerning high school and college and how we use the FMS and how it's implemented. Well, we're fortunate enough to have Brian Bott, strength coach for the University of Wisconsin, with us today, and I'm going to ask him a few questions concerning this topic. Brian, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Brian, when did you first get introduced to the FMS?
About 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a Perform Better clinic, saw Gray speak. It was kind of the early inception of the FMS. I was actually going to leave the presentation, but for those of you that remember, Gray had his Shook Me All Night Long video that was playing, and I was actually getting ready to get up for lunch. Heard the video, saw some of the videos he was showing of NFL hits and whatnot, and stayed and was thoroughly impressed of just the concept and some of the things he was presenting, so developed a relationship with him from there, and been using the FMS ever since. All
right, great. That was 2005. Yeah, good thing you didn't get up and leave for us as well, because having you implemented to Wisconsin has been great. Just getting that feedback from you over the last few years. When you first started using it, what were some of the things you took when you started implementing it into your programming?
I think one of the things I saw is the guys that scored predominantly poorly on the FMS were guys that we saw predominantly in the training room a lot, missing a lot of practice time with non-contact soft tissues type of injuries, overuse injuries. And so I started putting some of those puzzle pieces together and understanding that, hey, this really made sense, and I really want to dive into this a little more and get a feel for how the system as a whole works.
Yeah, you mentioned injuries, and that's one thing that we've seen, especially with some of the more recent research coming out. Low FMS scores related to injuries. You've got in talking to you some today, you've kind of got some interesting takes on that as far as injuries are concerned.
You know, it's really interesting because I think that not only using the FMS system has helped us reduce injuries with the players that we're implementing it with, but it also we're seeing a return to play a lot quicker, because I think once you start looking at creating a more mobile, more stable athlete, and then you can build your strength program around that and have a great foundation in the weight room. A guy gets injured, he's more easily rehabable, I guess would be the term I would use, because he has great mobility going into his injury. He has good stability going in. He has a good strength foundation, and we're seeing guys actually return to play quicker that are scoring better in the FMS, and then having a great strength foundation as well with it.
Okay. Playing off that with you being at a college, a big Division I university setting, and then some of the problems in high school in implementing the FMS. I mean, that's been a big concern for a lot of people when they first get introduced. Well, how in the world am I going to be able to put this into my setting? I mean, I'm one strength coach, or I'm one trainer at a high school level, or even a Division III college level. How do you see coming over or dealing with some of those obstacles of trying to actually implement it? What do you do at Wisconsin?
You know, what I do at Wisconsin is the guys that I work with, I screen them myself. I find it more beneficial for me to get my hands on them to see the different discrepancies in scores and whatnot. And then what I also do is I look for common issues within the groups that I'm screening. So then what we'll do is we will, in our warm-up, our activation, whatever you want to call it, before we train, we'll have corrective movements. So if we're in an upper body day as far as lifting, we'll do T-spine mobility, we'll do shoulder mobility. If we're in a lower body day, we're going to do leg raise, we're going to do deep squat, we're going to do lunge, we're going to do step up. So everybody's getting corrective work every day. If I have a guy that's an outlier, that has a very specific issue that I'm seeing very different than all the rest of the group, he will then also have his own corrective work that he will be doing in combination with the stuff that we're doing beforehand. So I guess what I can say is my guys do corrective work as part of their warm-up. I value it, even if they're scoring, even if they scored perfect, which none of them do, but even if they score in a passable range for the FMS, they're still going to do corrective work, because I never want them to drop under a certain score.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think those outliers are really the ones, that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the kids that you can really have an impact with, and ultimately that's going to improve the group as a whole, so I think that's pretty interesting. One thing, I worked at a high school for a number of years, and the kids are getting bigger, they're getting faster, they're getting stronger. What are you seeing in some of these kids coming to your program? Obviously it's an elite level, but what are some of the common things you're seeing at the high school kids right now? How are they moving?
No, I agree with you. They are bigger, faster, stronger, and they move worse. They bend worse. You're really reteaching a lot of basic things at the college level that high school athletes should know: how to stop, how to be balanced, how to bend with their knees as opposed to their low back. So we're seeing kids that are coming in that actually move worse, and then then they're loaded up with a bunch of weight on their back or on the bench press, and they have terrible, and I shouldn't say terrible, but poor mobility that we really have to focus on correcting right from the get-go. Where I think if this was implemented in a high school setting, I think kids would come into a college setting more apt, ready to hop right into their strength and conditioning program.
Yeah, too often we see these kids or these coaches, whether strength coaches, athletic trainers, or high school football coaches in particular, that really think that it's about getting more weight, more power. Obviously, that's what we got to do. But in starting using the FMS, how did that? Did you have that mentality early on, and has that changed what you look at now as a strength coach?
When I started as a strength coach, it was really a lot about numbers. The most weight you could put on the bar and things like that. And I think, that's very common. After I started delving into the FMS, using it for a few years on my own, really self-teaching myself, and then really connecting with you and Gray over the course of the years, learned that you can still have big numbers, but you can do it in a healthy athlete where they move correctly, they have stable joints, but you can also build a great strength foundation upon that. But if you try and build strength onto that, those are the guys that you find that score very poorly on the movement screen, and then also, consequently, are the guys that are in the training room a lot more. So I think from my end of it, just a really understanding that you can build great strength foundation, yet you can really focus on corrective movement and the FMS system and just have an all-around good athlete.
Yeah. One of the big obstacles trying to do this at a high school level, and that's one thing years ago when we implemented this system or came up with this system in the late 90s, that was our major goal, was how do we get it down at the high school level, these freshmen, sophomore, juniors, in order for them to lift right. But one of the common problems is, okay, we still got to get them bigger, still got to get them faster. So how do we educate the coaches? How do we educate the parents? What are some of your thoughts on trying to get this into the high school level as far as trying to teach the parents and the coaches, hey, you can have both? So what are some of your thoughts on that?
I think at any level really is discussing injury prevention. And parents understand that a lot. They'll understand that they want to see their son or daughter on the court, on the field as much as possible. So I think the education comes from them understanding that injury prevention is a big thing as far as their son or daughter playing at the next level. I also think education with coaches, them understanding that mobility, stability, and movement should supersede their strength development in the weight room. And to be honest with you, the more mobile and more stable they are, the stronger they're going to end up being over the course of their 4 years in their high school career. So with your younger athletes, this is me, teach them how to move better at a young age, so then when they do get into high school, high school coaches can then put them in their strength program and form good progressions. So in other words, don't just back squat them, when they enter into high school. Teach them how to do basic movements and then progress them into that.
Yes, one thing is interesting hearing you talk earlier today when we were having discussions is you talked about the deadlift being something. I mean, I think that's something that gets lost.
Yep.
Is a deadlift is a very fundamental move if you really get to the basics of being a hip hinge. So how do you see the deadlift playing a role? Kind of give me some of your thoughts about what we discussed earlier.
With some of our guys, with a lot of our guys, we started with the deadlift in the winter program. Just because for me, I wanted to repattern their squat pattern. We had a great strength foundation coming out of the season, but I wanted to make sure I look at it as an eight-month process, from January to August when we play our first game. So instead of trying to get everything in 8 weeks, like a lot of people do in their winter program, I sat down with our guys and said, hey, we're going to do a few things a little different this year. We had them deadlift for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and guys really didn't lose any strength in their back squat or their front, and guys actually got stronger in their front squat when we looked at it in the winter. So to me, teaching the proper patterns sometimes is more important than how much load you put on the bar initially, because if you can teach them correctly, then you never have to reteach them.
Yep.
Once they pattern it in, then you never have to reteach them. You can go back, kind of like I did for a couple weeks, and touch on it and tease them a little bit with it. But once they have those patterns built in, it takes a lot to change a motor pattern, and we talked about that today. So once you get them in the correct motor pattern, you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, it's another thing that we're talking about earlier today. I thought was very interesting is, the key is always for any coach, any parent, any whether it's a football coach, track coach, whatever it is, injury prevention has to be the top thing. Correct. And you had some interesting thoughts on it's not just about the athlete that gets injured. Obviously, we got to keep them on the field. But then when you take that person away, take that person off the field, then you got to stick somebody else in there. And that person, the next person, the second string person, the person on down the line may not be as prepared. Talk a little bit about that.
And some of the things that you see in a camp setting for football or a long practice time before you see a game, you see some overuse injuries, and what you can see with your top, you use your wide receivers as what we're talking about right now. If my top receiver goes down, okay, and maybe our third receiver goes down, it could be anything from a groin strain to a hamstring pull to a sprained ankle, anything that's going to have a missed practice for a couple days. Then what you have to do is you have to put guys and move them up so they get more reps. Some guys, you may have freshmen, this could be in high school as well. You take a senior out of the mix and you put some younger kids in there who are not used to getting reps, all of a sudden they're starting to break down a little bit. So then you have kind of like an epidemic within a position that you're losing 5-6 guys in 2 weeks, and it's just because one guy breaks down, even though he may be your main guy and you may be a little cautious with him, that can kind of snowball with the rest of that position group. And I've seen it at the college level and I've seen it at the high school level. One guy goes down, you're kind of holding your breath, hoping that guys in that other position group don't go down.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting take on it. Something that for a lot of us, even me myself, I you don't think about those certain things, but it certainly does play a role. Some of these younger kids at the college level or high school level aren't ready to take that next step. They need to mature and need to get themselves a little bit more stronger, a little bit more ready to be placed in there. But yes, they're forced into that situation, and they may not be ready. And then you're, like you said, using the word snowball. It's a great way to look at it. It just snowballs in. Now you got 3 guys down, and now you're have some problems.
And what it also does is it kind of deters from your practice situation too, because you're looking at a quarterback, your number one quarterback, trying to throw to guys and get his timing down. Well, if you got your 2 or 3 of your top 6 receivers that are out, and it's because maybe one guy got hurt the first day, and then all of a sudden you have a couple guys go down because they're not used to getting 60 reps, they're used to getting 30. It just snowballs, and then you lose some of your quality in practice as well. So it really affects more than just the one guy that goes down. It kind of affects your whole team. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but it really goes back, like everything else with the FMS, we want to stress quality over quantity. And I think if trying to get it at the high school level, trying to get or have this implemented in different places, that's really the underlying message. Let's focus on quality, make sure we can move right, strength and all the other things will come back.
Well, and I think, we talk about how at the NFL Combine that they're using the FMS now, but, like we discussed today, if it's infiltrated into the high schools and set up really well, then they come to college, they're already ahead of the game because they're moving better, and we can start adding strength to them, some speed development, all the other things that go into a great strength and conditioning program. Once they get to the NFL, that should not really be a concern, but it really is a big concern because so many people are more concerned with big squat, big bench, and you can have all those as long as you're building on a great foundation of mobility and stability.
Brian, thanks a lot for coming in and sharing some of your insights. These are topics that we get a lot of questions on, and hopefully this information will help some of you guys out there. For more information, contact functionalmovement.com. Check out some of the articles and other information. Thanks a lot, Brian.
My pleasure.